Hi, my name is Roberto Cardone. I work for Smarts Proprietary Limited. It's my personal company, and I'm food, wine and coffee retail consultant. Three things that make business rock for me are: number one, be honest; number two, trust your gut feel; and number three, when you're having fun, you know you're onto something.
We're told that there's got to be business plans around a business, that's got to be really well planned and well executed. Tell me that was the way when you opened Chibo Espresso.
Yeah, no, look, it wasn't any business plans.
Yeah.
It was pretty much, it was probably the restaurant in 1996 where I started with my partners Salvatore Pepe, Angelo Inglese and Claudio Ferraro. And the great thing about that partnership was all four of us had different skill sets. So Angelo, brought up in coffee lounges since the age of about, when he was born, because his dad had those sort of coffee lounges where at the front the women would sit there with their kids having gelati and coffee, while at the back, behind that nice veneer wall, there'd be some nice felt-clad tables, and everyone would be playing, or the Italians would be playing cards, so they're like the mini casinos. But Angelo got to learn how to make coffee from his dad, who was an amazing, amazing coffee inspiration to us, because, until the day he stopped doing the club, which was pretty much close to the days of when he died, he still had the piston coffee machine, and he always told us that those electronic ones were crap. So Angelo was pretty much, it was always infused in the whole coffee thing, and it was my cousin, and that was my Uncle Mim. And so we always knew as kids we were going to end up being in business one day. Salvatore Pepe, when he first came over from Italy, his mum died when he was about 7. And so his dad was about, he was close to, it was actually 60, so his dad was a bit elderly. And so he looked after his son every day, and all they would do in Calabria was just, come home and just cook after school. And his whole thing was about just eating. And from that, he started to just go, when he was about 16, he started to move around Italy a bit and work in kitchens. And he brought up in a kitchen where he worked for a few years and became like their head chef. And this is a restaurant that had 5 generations of the family business running the kitchen, and this was the first person to come in that was above the family, and is regarded as a son. And then there's Claudio. I met Salvatore when he came to Australia in his first job. I was working at Rigoni's and bumped into him, and we just got on really well. And so he brought the whole food behind him. Angelo brought the coffee, and then Claudio, it was about age 11 apparently, he was making cakes at home with his mum, using all the Italian recipes. His mum was always upset because she had 2 daughters and they weren't doing the Italian thing, and her son was. But she always said, he knew he was going to be a pastry chef. It was just, he said he wanted to finish school and become a pastry chef, and they said no, and then he had to finish his year 12 to make out he was going to university, and then it ended up at Alfresco's in the time when it first kind of opened in Adelaide, and when it was in its heyday and had all those amazing old Italian pastry chefs from Italy, and he got to learn by some great masters. And it's we were just talking about the other day how he said, some of the recipes he'd learned from some of the best Italian pastry chefs that just happened to be in Adelaide, in this little melting pot. And he now has passed on, he says he can see now he's passing that on to other people now. So it's pretty amazing. So, and then, and I was just sort of roustabout, I'd kind of like worked in, hospitality all my life. Well, back then we didn't call it hospitality, we just called it a deli. And it was just had lots of, and Mum and Dad were just really great at, bringing as much Italian sort of food to the public as much as possible. And I got to enjoy just loving to serve customers and working in the shops, and they always change businesses every now and then. And then I got into restaurants just to prove to my dad that I could save $100 a week, buy Italian shoes, insure my car, and buy my own clothes, which that wasn't going to happen. But he always wanted to have a family business, and then I ended up working at Rigoni's for 8.5 years, where I really did like an apprenticeship in hospitality and learned a lot about restaurants under Giacomo Cahill. And then I just got to meet some amazing people with Philip Zappia, another legend for me. He'd been in the restaurant industry in South Australia from day dot, I reckon. with a place called Black Orchid, and if you open it up now and called it Black Orchid, then it still looked the same, but it'd probably be really hip and groovy because it was back then. And I've seen the photos and I haven't seen anything like it. You know, and he was opposite La Catina, which was owned by Jacondo, so they were actually old rivals. So it wasn't a good thing that I left Jacondo to go business with him when we did Squizzy. But look, you know, we in the time of developing our partnership, it was more about who could do what, and we all had the same vision, which was great, you know, and that was probably the biggest business plan. We all had experience in working for people. I probably had the most experience in running a business than the others, and so I just kind of like coordinated it and put it together, and I just had a great team of people, and so we opened Cibo Ristorante in 1996 with the idea to bring of what's happening in Italy now, so that's when we started doing pasta crab, which everyone was still doing bolognese and alla pannas and marinaras. You know, we were doing, our bolognese was called ragu, which is what it's supposed to be called, but you know, and so, you know, we had a lot of authenticity because you know, Salvatore's, you know, roots in Italy really helped us. Claudio went to Italy and learnt to do pastries. The coffee thing, Angela and I, you know, as cousins, we just always complained about who can make the best coffee, and we still don't let each other make each other's coffee. And when we do, it's only in front of people and we're polite. But you know, we both think we make a better coffee, so that's fine. I know I do. So yeah, so regarding the business plan, no, it was for people with a lot of support from parents that put up their houses as collateral for loans we took out of the bank. We opened up Cibo Ristorante, and you know, the budget blew out from, I think, $450,000 to $724,000. You know, back in 1996, I don't think you see many people spending $724,000 on a restaurant these days. And now that we know that pop-ups are so much cheaper, we could probably do 20. So yeah, look, you know, it was our time. You know, it was just a great. You know, we did something to a building that was a lot of work, and a very happy landlord. And we opened up this trotteria, contemporary style, where we were making everything from wood oven bread, pizzas, pasta. Back then we were aging all of the meats, so we were trying to do the bistecca florentinas in the true tradition. If we did a bolognese sauce, a ragu, we would age the mince to actually get the flavour and the texture right. We'd make all our own pastries, cakes, gelati. We had you know, a friend of Claude's, Tommy, who made all of our gelati back then. You know, and he was from Sicily. So we were just doing the real things. You know, what was happening in Italy, we were doing then and then right now, and it became really busy. And luckily enough, because I lied to a bank manager about an extra loan, which he was very kind about, and I remember doing one of these talks, and I told the story, and he put his hand up and said, "You lied." So, and you probably noticed in my first 3 points of business, one of them is be honest. Yeah, you should be honest. It does come back and get you.
So after the success, I guess, of the restaurant, or at least, you know, that going along and spending a lot of money on it and all the rest of it, how did you jump from that to Cibo Espresso? In terms of, I mean, was that a well-planned and executed piece of work again, or was it the four mates getting together and
Well, no, it was
do?
probably Claude with ants in his pants, who said, if we don't open a business within 5 years of this partnership, I'm moving on. And so so if I go a step back from that, actually, we thought we were pretty great by the time we opened up Cibo, the restaurant. You know, we were flying. And we all, it was probably about a year and a half in, 18 months in, and we were offered a site at the Unleashed shopping centre called the Metro. It's still a bad site. We thought we could change it. And we invested heavily in designing a modern day cafe. So it's going to be more of a modern, cool place. A lot more faster than a restaurant style. Because we knew coffee and cake and gelati and snack sort of food was already working then. And people were wanting, even back then, were wanting things to be less formal. And then we thought we'd open up a lounge bar because no one was doing bars back then alongside of it. And then at the back of it, we thought, well, with this big open kitchen, at the back of the kitchen, it'd be really great to have a cheese shop. And if you've got a cheese shop, you should have a bottle shop. And if you have a bottle shop and a cheese shop, you should have a bakery. And with a bakery, you should have a, like in the TV, we say it's a rosticceria, where you can just have all these lovely types of foods to take home. You know, we got down to the detail of coming in, and you could buy a risotto pack, and it was pre-packed for you. It was in compartments. The rice component was pre-cooked to a certain point. It had how much butter you needed. It had a bit of stock. And then it had some of the ingredients to go into the rice. And you'd actually just go home and there'd be instructions on how to actually cook this in a pan. It would take you 5 minutes. And I'll go back to that risotto dish, because we did a few dishes like this back then. And we were just going too far, really. And what happened was liquor licensing to have a bottle shop and a lounge bar, you needed a hotel license. And we'd already been through a special circumstance with Cibo Restaurante, so we thought we could probably get around it. And we had to prove a need, and so we proved a need. And back then, you know, a need was like what's used today. You can just sell Italian wines, or you can just sell wines from one region in the world, and you've proven a different need. But back then, the Hotel Association was very strong. And we didn't go to probably the right schools, the ones that I'd send my son to now. So, you know, and that look, it was a really closed community. You know, it's kind of, you go back then in the 90s, you know, it was who you knew. And when we went to court, I never forget, you know, someone saying to me, "What school did you go to?" I said, "Nord High." I don't think so. I was like, yeah? I didn't understand what he was talking about. But when the case got to court, we actually, in the real world, we won. By the law, we won. But you had to be within a certain zone to be able to contest what we were doing. The only hotel was 2 blocks out of the zone and contested it with the strength of the Hotel Association going against us, which means we lost the case. But they made a law called the Cipollini law. So you could be standing in a bar but leaning on a stool, and that would be classified as seated. From then, the laws did change from that court case that cost us $250,000 to why we can actually sit down today and be seated in a restaurant without eating. So, you know, we'd made a lot of change. So from there, we were completely, you know, I don't even know how we even thought we had the money to go overseas. And we all took off overseas individually for like 6 to 8 weeks each. And it's just bizarre. It was like this, you know, exodus. And we all basically did the same trip, you know, which was going to New York and saw Starbucks and just thought, this is really bad coffee. But, you know, thought, but, you know, they've actually stopped everyone that's drinking bottomless cups of coffee for $1 and now made them drink $5 triple shot lattes. They turned the coffee world upside down. I mean, if it wasn't for them, there wouldn't be such a demand on coffee in the world, and there wouldn't be such an industry as there is today. And I really got that their marketing was very smart. And then, you know, fly over to London and, you know, Trafalgar Square, and I remember saying to my wife, well, what's all these franchise businesses? These people crazy franchising. They've got no heart and soul, they've got no passion, you know, you've got to create stuff from scratch, it's got to, you know, come from here. And then we go to Paris and sit in these, you know, goddamn gorgeous cafes. You know, they were just the sexiest cafes on earth. And it was just so that beautiful moment, you know, you just kind of like, wow. And then they serve your coffee and you almost spit it out. So bad. It really was. You know, they love their coffee bitter. They're like probably the old American roast, really dark. And you know, and then finally we get to Rome. It's you know, we're in heaven. We're close to the Pope. And decent coffee, decent pastries, and you know, the French have great pastries. Sorry, you know, and but really great snack food. And it's funny, when we all came back, we all said the same thing, like, you know, this coffee thing, everyone, because back then Hudson's was opening up to Australia, there was Glory Jeans, a couple of other chains, but they were all doing the American side of, they were just copying Starbucks, really. And we just thought, well, Starbucks originated on the Italian espresso idea, and so we thought, why don't we just do the, Italian coffee thing? And so he goes, well, I know the recipes to the food, and Claude knows the pastries. We've got Tommy that can make gelati, Anjo's make coffee, and you know how to make a shop look good, and get it organised. And so we went ahead and did this store, and that was at the point where, if we didn't do this store, it was December 2000, and we had to open a store before December 2000 because Claude has had enough of this failure of a business and said, if we don't open up a business by the end of 2000, I'm going. And so we opened up Cibo Espresso, which was the mistake out of the Supreme Court, the liquor licence problem that we had. We opened up in the 28th of December, and we opened it because it was Le Mans, the car race was in Adelaide, that once. And we opened for that and New Year's Eve, and then we closed it for a week because we hadn't finished the stock. We just did it to prove to Claude we could open a business within the 5-year time limit, even though half of it wasn't working properly. And then Cibo Espresso opened up, and so.
Which was the first?
At Rundle Street. I was there today actually.
On the corner?
Yeah, I was there today. It was quite. I was introduced to a new staff member, and said, "Oh, you're lucky. You got to start at the top, the first store." So and it opened up, and once again we'd gone over budget. I think we'd spent $560 on that shop back then, and it failed really badly. It failed for 9 months. I think we just couldn't push turnover past 12 or 15 grand. We had 24 seats inside. We didn't have an outdoor area, and everyone came in and sat down and thought, wow, this place is cool. I'm going to sit here all day. People were spending like $5 to $6 a head. And it wasn't until we realised, and we actually did design everything for takeaway because we really picked up on the whole takeaway thing happening. So, and then we started doing some guerrilla marketing tactics. We never did marketing, so this was quite interesting for us to even dress people up in uniforms and stand in the mall and give away deals. Went around to the university and posted menus on the walls, doctors' offices, anyone's office, and just put catering menus up and gave them deals to do takeaway. And then it still, it started to go, but, by accident, as most things have happened, by accident for us. The government, South Australian government, then decides to sack all these public service people working in the public service, cut costs. It was about 2001. And also this was at the time when the economy, the Asian crisis had happened. So we were just coming out of that. And also the YK2 bug. Yeah. YK2? Y2K. Yeah, thanks. And also wireless went into stores, where people could start using free Wi-Fi. And so there was a lot of changes happening, and this is the same time the government decided to sack all these public service people to save money and then rehire them, the next day as contractors. And of course, and that way they emptied buildings out and sold them off and made money that way, and then they had all these contractors out with no offices. And so, free Wi-Fi, a place to meet, that place looks all right. So all of a sudden, it started to drive traffic to us. At the same time, the smoking laws, I think the next thing was the smoking laws came in, where you couldn't smoke within 20 metres of a public service building. And so, by this time, the water fountain was actually getting punched in by the non-smoker, going, those smokers, they always have breaks, drive me nuts. And then when they started to see them walking away from the building to have a cigarette, to have a coffee, the non-smoker and the smoker became friends and walked together to Cibo Espresso and have coffee. And takeaway started to really take off, and people working harder and faster, and so that's when our turnover, it doubled. We went from 12 to 15,000, and I think after 9 months we started to hit 24,000 a week, and then we get up to 28. I mean, and that store got close when we had it was travelling along close to $35,000 a week in sales, and you've got to think from a business that really was failing, and we were just tipping money into it. So But yeah, and then everybody wanted one, so we had a demand, and so then we had to work towards franchising.
So was that just digging into that period a little bit? Was there a point there where you would have just given it away? We decided
No, never.
it was never going to not work.
Too much pride, us. we were too proud.
It was always going to work.
Well, the thing was, we loved it so much.
Yeah.
I think if we didn't love it, we probably would have given it up.
Yeah.
But we just loved it. It was, we would sit there just like, but it's so great. Surely it's got to work.
Someday. And I guess during that period too, and even now I'm sure, something about coffee shops and football teams and TV shows, everyone seems to be an expert. Everyone can tell you how to run it. I'm sure you'd have had a few people come in and say what you're doing wrong
all
is.
the time.
How did you cope with that?
Well, actually, in the restaurant, I used to cope with it really well, because I used to serve people all the time that always told me how to run the restaurant. And they actually gave me a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
Some were really bad, but some were really good too, And there was, you really... it was actually being a waiter on the floor and having that one-on-one contact with your customer. That's a touch point. We have to call that a touch point now.
Yeah.
Before it was just serving someone,
Keeping someone happy.
I remember trying to drill this into the network was the touch points are all the staff, and we needed to set up a communication system that we could actually be able to access what they're hearing from the customer and what's their feedback, because they're the ones, that's the closest point you have. When you get to a bigger size, you're so removed from the day-to-day running, you don't actually feel and touch what's going on, and you can only dream up and see things from somewhere else and hope they're going to work.
And how did the four of you how did you guys hang together? I mean, in the end of the day, I guess there'd have been days when things didn't work well.
Yeah, look.
And the coffee
I've got to say,
debate would have been huge some days.
Overall, my partners are really calm, gentle souls. Unfortunately for them, I'm not. But fortunately for me, that actually, and they knew how to deal with me. Like, here he goes, going on a tangent, and just let him go, and we'll speak to him tomorrow. But look, we just got on really, really well. Look, it was. There always are difficult times, and we've been together as partners nearly 18 years. It is 18 years. So it's a long time, and things do change in a long time like that. But in those formative years, it was pretty much everyone just went with what was happening. It was so fast. There was no time to argue about it.
Yeah, just went with the flow.
Yeah.
And what about the people side of the business in terms of growing now and having to grow with people that now became managers and ultimately owners?
They became our philosophy was also because I got a head start into business from when I started working at Cardone's I got a share I had to work for in Cardone and then in Grimaldi's, and so there was a real heads up. And so I always thought it'd be really nice that if there was an opportunity to partner with staff that we thought were really good and could actually manage a store, that it'd be an opportunity to do some joint ventures. And so when we opened up King William Street and Grenfell Street on the corner, we took on two of our staff that were actually running the Rundle Street store as partners. And that's probably when it goes back to that whole franchising thing where we didn't want to franchise, we actually wanted to do joint ventures. But we didn't like paying tax, and as we opened up more businesses, payroll tax started to eat in, and I don't think we had accountants around like BDO back then to advise how to do the sneaky way of doing it. But back then it was pretty risky, and we didn't, with tax at that point, we knew as we were growing, we were being watched, and it was not a good time to do anything silly. So we went to our lawyers, and they basically said, you can open up the store, you can have more than the majority share, and you won't pay payroll tax. Then he came back and said, no, you have to, even though it's a partnership, you're going to be seen as the controlling entity, even if you're at 40%. So then, because we were actually thinking of doing 49% for us, 49% for them, 2% in trust, which is what a lot of people do now, which I think is illegal. Is it illegal? It depends. So we at that point, our lawyer turned around and said, look, the only way you can do this is if you franchise it. You can have complete control of the business and you can hold a lesser share and not pay GST. And he said, by the way, I've got a hardware store franchise agreement here. I can convert it for you. Because we needed it within 2 weeks. So we just made shift. And he said, how many stores do you have? And I said, I don't know, 3 or 4. I'm going easily after that. You know. And he just turned around and said, oh, that's fine. We'll just keep it simple. And then I remember going to him after the 4th store and he said, well, this franchise agreement's no good. Because you said you were doing 3 and 4, now you're doing more, you know. And that's how we got into franchising. But what it did become was, because we are manufacturers, so like the way we control the business, we love food, and so we have a manufacturing base, and we manufacture all the food and things that go into store. So it was our way of having consistency. And that is a business you have to, manufacturing is a business that the government now acknowledges you have to invest a lot of money in to keep on growing and to keep on working. And so all the money we would make would be about growing to grow more stores. Because every time we got bigger, we'd have a bigger kitchen, more equipment. The whole innovation just keeps on changing on how you process and do things to keep that economy of scale and to keep that level of quality and consistency.
So with the franchise model, it mustn't always work. There must be times when the owners have got different ideas to you.
Yeah, really fortunate in the beginning, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon we had a really good run. Probably the biggest problem we had is when partnerships within a franchise ownership didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we would use different tools. We were just fortunate to be part of a pilot program probably in the late 90s where it's probably a bit like, is it Myers-Briggs, but there's an Australian version using all Australian ways of... Yeah, so we use Express, which is actually made in Australia for Australians. And it's not based on Myers-Briggs, which is apparently based more on the norms of the Americans in the 70s. And so we got to use this tool. It was amazing because when we especially when we took on franchisees, we'd take it on, but it doesn't matter what you do. If you have a death in the family, your mindset changes. If you have a divorce, your mindset changes. If you get married, your mindset, everything changes all the time. But it gives you a point to kind of like reflect on and say, well, that point is where this person was at. It kind of like tells you what the traits are. So when I had to mediate partners a lot to help them focus on the business and not on themselves, I used to use this quite a bit, and it used to help me understand not who was right or who was wrong, but how they thought, and then how to actually help them communicate together just to get over their little humps, because they really were. It's really the most problems are just little humps. In one store, we could see 2 people managing the front of house just wasn't working, and you need one. And we noticed in any partnership you need one leader. And in this partnership, there was 2 leaders and there was 2 teams of staff going against each other, and it was just toxic. Once we separated and identified who had the better traits to be out the front, who was the people's person, that person went out the front. Who wasn't went into back of house and did bookwork and ordering and systems and rostering and things like that. Once we did that, that business turnover just jumped. It was just an amazing thing. The culture, so it's just a bit like, it's in instigated change management. So we started to get a shift in the culture of the staff. People that were, we stopped focusing on staff that were negative, because if you just focus on negative staff, you just create a negative team. But negative staff do have that pulling power to actually bring you down quite easily. So that was one way of trying to manage our way out of it. But later on, as we got larger, I think we definitely did have a bit of a rebuke as we got after we did the sale. So
yeah,
it's, I think for in the general gist, I can honestly say for all the franchisees, they were excited.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be part of it and they loved what we did.
So you sold the business in July? Or
no, so it was a 2-part sale. So the first part of the sale was in December 2012, where we sold a majority share to Retail Zoo, who own Boost Juice and Salsa and Hatch. And the idea, well, back then this is when we set up a new manufacturing kitchen, another lot of expense, and we probably spent too much money because we were actually trying to build a kitchen that was going to supply a lot of the base products nationally. And at that time it was only around the 20 store mark. And we also came up with the brand Cucina, which is Cibo Cucina, which will be Cucina eventually. And that's the home ready meals, so more of the recipes of the restaurant. And those are things you just buy in the supermarket, and we do coffee in the supermarket and gelati as well. And that was just to generate sales whilst the business was growing. But it wasn't enough, and we needed to sell down our shares, and we needed to put more capital into the manufacturing business. And then the second part of that sale was completed just in June that's gone past. And so we're no longer, so we're ex-Cibo Espresso people, and but we are still manufacturers of the products that go into store under their direction, of course.
So now having exited or got away from the espresso, the everyday side of things that would have taxed your mind, do you think differently now?
Well, I've been to New York. I just got back, and I'm just on fire. I just can't. I've come back from before that. Went to Barcelona, and I went to Italy just to kind of get my soul back. Look, you know, it's just so. There's just. I think Cibo Espresso has been a great thing, but 18 years in one business is a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
And and I'm just kind of just seeing that as an entrepreneur, is one of the things you just love doing is just doing and doing new things. And I've just been reinventing myself in Cibo Espresso for so long now. I think it was probably time for me to move on.
It's time to change completely.
Yeah.
All right, look, I'm just to finish off. I'm going to ask you a few questions just to see what you think about a few things. So I've got 5 very simple questions. What word do you really hate?
Vietnamese.
Vietnamese?
Yes, I could never say it. It's taken me a long time.
How do you describe your job now to a 5-year-old?
God. I don't have a job at the moment.
There you go. That's even a better way.
No, that's not true. I bring food and wine concepts to life.
Perfect. At your funeral, what would you want most to hear someone say about you?
He always cooked too much.
And what profession would you least like to do?
Be careful in this building.
Accountants aside.
It's because I need them so much. That's why I want to do it. Least that I'd want to do. God, I've never had. I have no idea.
I'm going to write accountant for that. All the way out. What sound do you love the most?
That steam on the coffee machine.
There you go. Thanks very much. Thanks, Roberto. Thanks for your time.